Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Gayle Carson. Welcome to Living Regret Free, a program that shows you how to live a better and more joyful life. As an added bonus, I invite you to listen to an introduction to my Mindset Matters program, which ties into this so well. Go to www.sobmindset.com. It's free, and I know you will enjoy it. If you'd like to contact me personally, drop me a line at gaylecarson13@gmail.com or go to my website, www.spunkyoldbroad.com, and sign up for my weekly newsletter. My guest today is Duff Gardner, and he's a self-described venture humanist and a diversity activist. His diverse business interests include a coaching, consulting, and angel investing business focused on impact-driven entrepreneurship. On a personal level, he draws strength from his modern family as a gay father of 2 adult kids and a rescue dog, and he lives on the west coast of Canada, beautiful Victoria, BC. Welcome, Duff.
Hello, Gayle. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's so nice to be here.
You're so welcome. I have to ask you because I'm an animal nut. What kind of a rescue dog do you have?
My dog's name is Seamus, and he is what's called an American Staffordshire Bull Terrier. So he's in the Pity family. And so the reason that's so important to me is he's an absolute lamb. There's not a pillow or a blanket that he doesn't love. And I have a quick story. He's in my hometown here in Victoria. One of the businesses I own is called Men in Kilts, and he is in 8 parades a year in Victoria.
Oh my gosh.
Marching along with us in our kilts, and he's got a matching bandana. He's a little bit of a local celebrity. So yeah, he's my lamb.
Oh, wow. Well, of course, I love that. I love all of that. Believe me, you had me at the dog. So, tell me about living in Victoria and what part that plays in the joy of, because we're talking about living regret-free, and so many people do not live regret-free. They do not live their joy. So tell us how it plays into what you do and your joy.
Absolutely. I travel a lot for work. I probably spend about 10 days out of a month somewhere else. And so I know this absolutely. When I come back to Victoria, I can't explain it, but it's very grounding. So when I come back to Victoria, it feels very grounding. It's a city of about 450 metropolitan area, 450,000 on the southern tip of Vancouver Island. So I walk Seamus every day for about 2 hours. I'm 10 minutes from the forest and 10 minutes from the ocean. The temperature here where I live it's pretty good. If it snows here, everything absolutely shuts down. So it's rare that it does that. We get less rain than Seattle and Vancouver because all those clouds blow inland. For me, I've chosen to live here, chosen to raise my family here, just because of everything that Victoria brings. And so, yeah, I love it. It's an important part of me kind of having joy in life, to having energy. Yeah, I love it a lot. In fact, I like bringing people here too, because I just love it so much. So yeah, thanks for asking.
And well, I live in 3 sunshiny places, Palm Springs, San Diego, and Miami. So I get what you're saying, because the gray north would not work for me at all. But you talk about a second act business. Right. What does that mean?
Oh, well, I have a lot of opinions on that, Dr. Gayle, but there's a statistic out there recently that over half of us will be in some form of self-employment over the next 10 years. And so I'm 54 years old. I'm of the generation that got really used to not having a job forever, But this is new, the idea that in our lifetime, we're going to have like a kind of a freelancing gig, or even if it's a side thing, we're all going to be pseudo self-employed at the very least, or at least half of us will be. So this idea of a second act business is happening to a lot of us, where we're put in a position either financially, or it's an emotional thing, or culturally, where we want to start a business, go work for ourselves, have a side business. Even my mom has an artist business. In her 70s. So this is kind of a thing. And so a second act business is kind of like reinventing yourself and aligning yourself with your values and what you want in life, and kind of going back into the employment, instead of going back into the employment queue, starting a business and in your second act. So sometime somewhere around 40s to mid 50s or beyond. That's what that's all about.
Wow.
And yeah,
That's so true, though, Duff, because I think, well, first of all, as you said, nobody has a job for life anymore. And there are so many people who want to get oh, I always wish I wanted to. Now, some of them are successful, some are not, but
right.
at least they get a chance to check it out. And that's the important thing. But you
Absolutely.
also say, you're a father, you're gay, how you navigated that. I have a gay son and he's married to
Mhm.
this, oh my God, he's wonderful. And the two
Oh,
of them take really good care of me.
nice.
So, but I can't tell you that he's got any kids. So how do you navigate what you're going through?
Okay. Yeah, thanks for asking. I've never really shared this story publicly, so you're the first time. So, but I'm totally happy to do so. When I was in my early 30s, the kid's mother and I, we were just, so the kids were 2 and 4, and we hit what a lot of couples, what happens to you at that age, where you've just, you put each other through school, you've started your first jobs, you started your career, you started a family, you bought your first house, all these big milestones in life. And that drift happens to a lot of folks in their 30s. And so we sat down and had a hard conversation. We had met when we were 18 years old. We dated for 5 years. We were married for 10. And we decided to consciously decouple, I think the word is right now. That's not what the word we used at the time, but that's what we did. And so we decided that, we had a good talk about where we wanted to go and what we wanted in life and who we were and this kind of thing. And so for me, this was something that I didn't understand about myself when I was younger. It's not that I didn't know that there was some stuff going on, but I wasn't acting on it. I wasn't really I wasn't focused on it. I was really in the marriage. But now that we were having this conversation, it came up. So we decided to sit down with the kids, and we told them at 2 and 4. And of course, they didn't really understand it. They were just understanding that something was changing. But we've raised the kids separately, but together. We've moved 1, 2, 3 times, not in the same home, but into different cities earlier on. We've co-parented, we've supported each other. We're kind of like pseudo cousins / siblings, their mother and I now. I'm friends with her family, her best friends, and similar. So we've forged this co-partnering, co-parenting relationship. My kids are now 25 and 23, and they're the most awesome, independent, well-adjusted, caring, compassionate kids you could imagine. So to be honest, we could talk about whatever you want. That is my marker of success. Whatever happens
No
from here on in.
question. There is
Yeah,
no question, Duff, that how your family, of course, there are certain situations where, as much as you try, it turns out differently.
yeah.
But, the fact that you've got kids that are great kids, I mean, that's a lot of it. So, but you also, you speak mostly, I guess, about diversity and inclusion. And I
Mhm.
think diversity is a word that we've heard a lot, and inclusion is something we've heard in the last 2 or 3 years.
Sure.
So, what's your feeling about that?
I would say that I'm stepping into that. So just over a decade ago, I almost got the top job as kind of, you guys have an HRC group down in the States, Human Rights Organization, Human
Right?
Rights Campaign. So I very nearly took a very similar position here in Canada. And it was just after gay marriage started and was accepted. It's been over a decade now in Canada that same-sex couples can marry. And funnily enough, the sky has not fallen. Things have actually worked out pretty darn good. So uh, I have not in the past made it a big part of what I do, but in the past year and a half or so, it's become really important to me. I think it's maybe an age-related thing where I stand up and talk about it. I was at an event and I thought I'd test it out in the context of revealing a little bit about myself and my backstory. And I ended up getting a standing ovation, not just from the 200 people there, but another 200 people online who were watching the event live cast. And some people came up to me after the show and they said, there's not enough people who are standing up and telling their story. There's too many people, young people who don't have role models. And so you need to tell your story more. And, the thing is, I think like when you're living as a openly gay person, you get to know a lot of people. There's a lot of really successful gay folks and, you just meet people and people and it's not a big deal. You just think, okay, well, I live in Canada, it's all good. But then you start to look around the world and you start to notice how it's impacting people and people are being thrown off buildings.
Well,
So,
I was
you
just
know,
going to say there are so many countries who ban gay activities, gay people, who stone them, who sentence them to death. I mean, it's so, unbelievable to me. Of
yeah,
course, I was raised in a very open environment, and you know how old I am. So
yeah, for
I
sure.
was
Well,
raised in an environment where none of this was talked about, and I really didn't even know about it. But my parents raised me in a very uh, everybody is equal, and you do good, and you've got morals, and you are ethical, and go from there. So
yes,
I was very, very fortunate, and then I went to a college which was a communication and a drama and theater school, and
yep.
there were a lot of gay kids there, and I was best friends with many of them, and never even thought about it one way or the other. So I guess a lot of it depends on where you are. But I will also say, and maybe I was just not aware of it, but the
Hmm.
bullying that you see today, you didn't see then. And maybe it was because social media wasn't then what it is now. But
Hmm.
you have a master's degree in learning sciences.
Hmm.
So what kind of insights has that provided you?
Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah, I did that about just over a decade ago. I went back to school, and um, funnily, I was kind of a wacky duck within the group. I was a bit of a different person within the group. What I loved about taking that degree was I really geek out on uh, psychology, performance, how we learn. That program was actually fabulous because it was run by a guy who goes around the world. So it was a new program, and it was run by a guy that goes around the world. And what he does is he sets up university programs. And he is a self-described revolutionary. He's an expert, not just in cognitive sciences, but also artificial intelligence. And so he had a very specific point of view in teaching this program. And so there was only two cohorts that were ever taught. And so I feel very fortunate and lucky. And his philosophy around learning science was that learning by doing is kind of missing, that the system of education that we've all grown up in is broken, and that in fact there's a new paradigm ahead of us that is emerging that we should all prepare ourselves for. And so I've kind of taken that philosophy that I learned from him and I've advanced it a little bit as well. And the way I think about it is this is we grew up in the system of education that was preparing ourselves, or it was preparing us to participate in the economy a certain way. Before that, there was learning by doing, practice, mentorship, very specific goals, basic problem solving. Today, we live in a completely digital connected world. It's very different than what we grew up in. Like again, I'm 54. Education is a very linear system. We're living in a dynamic system. So how do you participate in that effectively? So I think it's interesting. I think that the way we learn and the way we think about things is going to shift. And so if you overlay this idea of learning by doing on top of our current environment of this dynamic, connected, internet-based world, you can actually do quite well. And so you see that today with a lot of the younger people who just step into things and just start doing it. They practice, they access mentors, they just take baby steps. And so our generation, it's kind of there's this resistance to that idea that we feel quite often.
They
And
don't
I
wait for permission, really, is what you're saying.
no, no. And so that resistance they don't feel. And so I think like one of the things I rally against is this idea of resistance in our generation and where it comes from. And I have this belief that it comes from that system of education we grew up in.
Well, I don't doubt that, because what do they say? They say by the age of 8, all the creativity is out of your child.
Oh, oh no.
but but you have this term that I introduced you with, venture humanist.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, career-wise, I've been in a position where I've either done angel investing a little bit or coached startups through the process of concept definition to launching out into the world. And so this idea of venture capitalism, uh, that idea to me is kind of old school. So I wanted to think of a word that felt good to me about just describing the kinds of things that I'm interested in. I'm from a even though I'm 54, I find business like a creative pursuit. I enjoy it. I enjoy being involved in business. I find it really creative. And so if I'm going to be involved in ventures, what's the approach that I want to take, whether I'm doing coaching work, whether it's consulting, whether I'm giving a little bit of seed investment to get it going. And so for me, this idea of venture humanist means that you're coming at whatever you do from a business perspective in a humanistic fashion. And that's the core basic idea, which is very distinctive from venture capitalism, which by definition is, you're going into a venture trying to figure out what you can come out with.
Exactly, exactly. So of these ventures that you have coached or funded, how many have been successful? What have you learned from them? And what has been the result of all of this?
Okay. I would say that the main thing I've learned in any business I've been involved in is I have this concept called be investable. I think that when you're in business, your goal should be to be trusted, know, like, and trust. So when I wade into any kind of venture, that's kind of my compass, I guess, is like, how do you become investable? So like if I'm, for example, some of the smaller ventures I've coached through financing, like we're digitally based. So like, how do you talk about your business in a way where your ideal clients trust you? How do you build creative concepts so that they have legacy value to others? These are some of the concepts that I'm proud of focusing on.
Well,
in
I
those
would be
ventures.
proud of that too. I mean, I think it's fantastic, and to have a coach who is simpatico with you and who can really understand what you're trying to do, because you're not dealing with big corporations, you're dealing with mostly entrepreneurs.
Sure.
It's very gratifying to hear the results that they get and to also appreciate what they're going through. But you also, you say stand in your value. What does that mean to you?
Okay, thank you. Well, I think in particular, it's a circle back to the conversation about education. Like I think a lot of the people who are self-employed today are, 40 plus, and they're having this struggle around resistance. And so where does the resistance come from? But also, like, what does it mean? So if you're in business as a startup, one of the key concepts you need to describe to people when you're growing is like, what is your value proposition? Like, why should you invest in this company, or why should you invest in me? And I think that as entrepreneurs, we struggle with this concept of worthiness or value. And it comes across in conversations that we have to enroll people in our services. It comes across in the prices that we charge. It comes across in lack of confidence, lack of clarity. It actually becomes a really circular problem, because if you have all that and somebody says to you, well, just get started, just try it, just test it, or just get your thing off the ground and start talking to people, that energy carries forward into the conversations, and it makes it harder and harder and harder to get what I would call traction in your business. So standing in your value is really about accessing your inner power and understanding how to communicate in such a way that, again, you become investable, or known, liked, and trusted by people you're trying to access.
It's funny, Duff, because I've had a lot of different businesses, but let's say it's just three businesses mainly. And I think I get more weary as I get older. And I don't say weary, W-E-A, I'm saying wary, because my first business, I was so young. I was 21. I was young and naive, and I just went full force ahead. And within 2 weeks, I was handed a cease and desist order, which I didn't even know what that was. And I had to, barrel my way through. And the same thing with my second business and my third. But I can tell you that nothing stopped me, because I was so gung-ho. But as I've aged, I've gotten more cautious. So, it's an interesting phenomena. And you have a podcast yourself that's called Off My Duff.
Yes.
So what is that all about?
Well, first of all, I grabbed that URL a long time ago, because I was like, I'm going to do something with this. But when you think about it, it's kind of funny, because it's something that a lot of us say to ourselves. I've got to get off my choose your word that represents backside, right? And do whatever, insert your goal. So I just thought it was kind of fun. And I had a goal one day that I'd start some kind of a lifestyle business around it when I was older. So I probably had that for about 10 or 15 years. And so I started to think about my podcast, and conventional wisdom was, set up your podcast to be very, like the business folks will say, SEO friendly so people can find it. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to have fun. So I like, for me, it's about a lot of people who are impact driven in business, who are service providers. They struggle with exactly what we're talking about, getting off their butts and starting. And so it's really, the podcast is to answer that age old question: how do you get off your backside and start making the impact that you want in the world? And so what I do is I talk to entrepreneurs. It's about a 25-minute podcast where we talk about origin stories, where they're taking their business, what kind of impact do they want to create, what insights they've gleaned along the way. And yeah, I'm having a lot of fun doing it. It's awesome.
That's great. I mean, I think that's wonderful, and the fact that this is your own deal, so you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And I think all of that and what you're talking about and everything that you're doing is really really interesting. But I'm going back to Seamus. How did you happen to pick him?
Oh man, there's a lot of serendipity in a rescue pet. So Seamus he was from a high risk shelter in San Bernardino, California. And there's a rescue organization in Victoria called Flirting with Fido. I became aware of him being available. And actually, I was just coming back from a business meeting, and they brought him over, and he's been with the family ever since. And, it was very accidental that he was rescued, because he just happened to be at the right place at the right time. When you have a rescue pet, it's the most interesting thing how they land in your life. But I can tell you, he's I don't particularly drink, so he's my bartender, I guess, in that respect. He's my best friend. He's my confidant, and he's actually kind of like almost like an energetic compass for me, because he knows things about me before I know it myself.
It's interesting because I dog sit for my son, who's got a little 19-year-old Chihuahua who was a rescue, who wasn't supposed to make it. I mean, if I told you what condition she was in, it was terrible. But she's 19 and still going strong.
Wow.
And so, and my cat, I have cats because when my kids were little, I had three kids, 5 dogs, and 3 cats. So It was a zoo all the time. Now I'm down to 2 cats because of where I live. Right. But they're around me all the time. They're here when I'm doing my shows. They're here when I'm sitting watching TV or climb into bed. I mean, they're there all the time. It makes a big, big difference.
Absolutely.
But, you're a very charismatic character, Duff, and I know people would like to be in touch with you. So where would they find you?
Well, Dr. Gayle, they can call me at the number that I've provided to you, the number that we've published. But we can also get me at duffgardner.com, DuffGardner. And there's a bunch of stuff on my website that they can access. The email there is duff@duffgardner.com, but there's also like a link where they can find me. So either of those ways are totally fine. So, yeah.
All right, so you heard it here, folks. It's duffgardner.com. And as you can see, I think what Duff brings to the table, even though this is all talking about living regret-free, what Duff brings to the table is a business sense, along with humanity, along with experience. And that's hard to find in someone who's coaching, especially a new business, an entrepreneurial business, because it's just people want you to bang it out, do this, do this, do this. And I think you're much softer, Duff. And I think that you probably work with people in a very, very charismatic way. So if you're interested in learning from Duff, or you'd like to have him as your coach or your mentor, or maybe even someone who might do some venture capital with you, not using his word, not venture capital, but doing some funding for you, get in touch with him. duffgardner.com. Go to his website, see what he's all about. I really think it would make a tremendous difference for you, and I think you'd be very, very happy with the results. I know Duff personally, and he's a great guy. So, Duff, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. I mean, hopefully people got a lot out of our interview, and I continue great. By the way, you never told me how old Seamus was. How old is he?
Seamus is 8. And in fact, after this interview, we're going to go on a nice sunny dog walk, just like I said. So,
Oh, that's super. That's fantastic. My oldest dog was 20. My oldest cat was 18.
wonderful.
So hopefully Seamus has a long, long life. Thanks
Yes.
so much for being with us today. And hopefully you'll hear from some of our listeners, because I'd really love them to experience you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gayle. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's show. I choose my guests carefully, so if you have someone you'd like me to interview, please drop me a line at gaylecarson13@gmail.com. In the meantime, check out my intro program, Mindset Matters, at www.sobmindset.com. See you next week.